Hello and welcome to Settling Up with GoCardless,
where we settle the score with payment leaders,
get their honest opinions,
hot takes,
and no chargebacks.
I think I'm completely the opposite on all the answers that you have said.
But clearly we work very closely together. And that one will probably come back to haunt me in 5 years' time.
Yeah, exactly.
And fundamentally it comes down to, when is the last time you got the highest quality at no cost? There is a cost to free.
My guest today is actually quite new to GoCardless. He recently joined as our Chief Product Officer. Please join me in welcoming Shaun. Shaun, welcome.
Thank you very much, Hamish. Thank you for having me here.
No problem. I could do an intro, but I feel like it's best come from the guests themselves. So Tell us a little bit about your background. I know you've got 20 years of experience in this.
I started off not in payments. I don't think anyone chooses to kind of go work in payments straight away, but I worked in mobile and found a route into payments from there. I originally worked for a company called Monetize that helped build some of the first mobile banking solutions in the UK. And then from there went to WellPay, where I had a number of leadership roles and left as the CPO of the European business. And then from there, worked in a couple of sort of fintechs and startups, particularly a company called Thread, which was the issuer processor in the UK that helped a lot of the neobanks kind of kick off and start. Then more recently, I've been at Checkout, where I was the senior vice president for product, looking after our core payments platform, launching into different regions, so Canada, Middle East, and Asia as well. And then have joined GoCardless.
Well, welcome. It's great to have you here. It sounds like a really depth of knowledge, so I think you're perfect for this podcast.
I've managed to convince people that's true. Let's see if it is.
You and me both.
Yeah.
So to kick things off, we're going to break the ice a little with a game. So it's called Approved, Pending, or Declined. It's our own version of the game Yay or Nay, effectively. Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a series of industry terms or ideas, and you'll have to say whether you give it one of the following. Approved, it's a green light, great idea, full speed ahead. Pending, it's an amber light, promising but not there yet. Or declined, it's a red light, terrible idea, stop it immediately. Make sense?
Yeah, got it.
Excellent. So, open banking as a term, approved, pending, or declined?
What I don't want to say is pending for everything, right? That would be boring.
Yeah.
I think let's go with approved. I think there are definite issues around the consumer's understanding of open banking, but fundamentally as a concept and a path forward, then for sure it's definitely something we want to be going full steam ahead on.
Banks charging PSPs for open banking access, approved, pending, or declined?
I mean, I'd love to say declined, but I think it's probably pending. This is fundamentally what are the economics of payments, right? And that's a super interesting conversation. So, they have some interesting arguments there that we should be looking at and making sure that we can, if open banking is going to be successful, then we have to make sure there's revenue streams associated with it.
Totally. I actually agree with you. I think that making sure that there is some sort of commercial viability for them means that we're going to create a better experience for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Visa's open banking scheme, approved, pending, or declined?
I'm going to say pending. Visa, amazing company. I've worked very closely with them throughout my career, so I'll be careful about what I say. But ultimately, it's right that there's a few raised eyebrows at them being in open banking. Clearly, we've got to see what they take it at face value and see what the offering is that they bring to market. So, we have to wait and see.
Okay, so I won't press you too much on expanding.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
Okay, fine. Cryptocurrency, approved, pending, or declined?
I mean, a really big subject, right? So I'd say some pending, some declined, some approved is the way I'd answer that, right? So I'm pretty bullish on stablecoins as a sort of a backbone to how international payments and things like that can work. But as a sort of a consumer proposition to pay for things, then I'd say that's pretty dead. And that one will probably come back to haunt me in 5 years' time.
Exactly. Buy now, pay later. Approved, pending, or declined?
I think that boat has sailed. It's approved, right? People's need for credit exists. It used to be serviced via credit cards predominantly, and BNPL found a niche and a market there. clearly we need to make sure it's regulated properly and that consumers are getting a fair deal. But, at the same time, I think we need to see innovation in the credit space, and that's a good thing for consumers potentially as well. So here to stay, and let's see how it manifests. But that doesn't mean we have to help consumers get into debt either.
Okay, I'm going to ask a couple more kind of personal ones, less industry
sure.
terms this time around, just so I can get to know you a bit better and the audience can as well. Getting to the airport as late as possible, approved, pending, or declined?
Approved. Definitely.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, you want to optimize for the least amount of time in the airport, right? I think that's kind of how I like to roll.
My anxiety wouldn't allow me to do that. It's an absolute decline for me.
I think that actually the distinction there for me is if I'm traveling with my family or with myself.
Sure.
So if it's just myself, I can do that. If it's with the family, then a little bit more time definitely takes the stress out of it.
Fine. Yeah. Okay. Rewatching films or series, approved, pending, or declined?
Depends on the film, right? Or the series.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I've got some things I go back to for sure that I watch probably too many times. I'd say like Aliens and Dune are probably like high up there. That probably tells you something. But like a series, I very rarely rewatch a series.
Yeah.
I'd say.
Hitting the snooze button more than once, approved, pending, or declined?
Declined. I think that's like, well, if I do that, then it's not happening. Right, I'm not getting up at that point.
So just turn it off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's got to be either like the first one or not at all.
Right. I can sometimes, if I've got something really important, I'll set multiple alarms and then snooze them all.
Yeah, right.
And that's when it's really important. But otherwise, I agree with you as well. And someone tries to call you instead of texting. Approved, pending, or declined?
Declined. And that's not because of that person, and I don't mean to be rude, but I think I get so many, like if I answer the phone, it's generally someone trying to sell me something. So if I don't see the number and I don't know it, then it's getting declined.
So that's why you declined my call earlier on today.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Understood.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I feel like we've got to know each other much better, and I won't take personally that you declined my call.
I'm sorry, Hamish.
It's fine. We'll move on. So as mentioned in your intro, you've got an extensive kind of experience and background in payments. I'd love to just understand a little bit more about kind of your journey and how you kind of got started and how you got to where you are today.
I started out in mobile, so I was pre-iPhone, so that long ago, and was working on the early days of smartphones and trying to work out what we were going to do with them. Through that, I kind of got the idea that mobile and money were going to come together. I didn't know how, and it wasn't like particularly sort of thoughtful about that. But that was something I was interested in, and found a company called Monetize that were kind of doing that. And this was back when we were doing like that first initial wave of banking services on phones. So we're talking about like text messages for alerts and that kind of stuff. And Monetize had a really nice idea, which is they were plumbing into the ATM network to get the information. So it was actually very low cost to the banks to start running those services. So that's how I got into payments and fintech. We didn't even call it fintech back then, but that's how I got into it. And from there, I ended up sort of working with a lot of the major banks and building out their mobile banking solutions. So the first iOS apps on NatWest and that kind of stuff were apps that me and my team put together, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And sort of towards the end of my time there, I was looking at Square had just launched, Izettle had just launched, and so I was really thinking that maybe we could provide a white label service to banks to do something similar. And that's when I really started getting more into the payment side rather than the banking side, and kind of was talking to lots of people there, and through those conversations got the opportunity to join WellPay, who had just been acquired out of RBS as part of the various machinations that happened through the banking crisis, and had been bought by Advent and Bain, and they wanted to start essentially a Square Izettle competitor, and so they hired me to kind of run the tech and product for that, which is where I really learned about payments, because I was just basically bluffing before then. And so WellPay was a great place to learn that, right? So, very entrenched in sort of in e-commerce, in POS. And so learned how to do that. And we launched a product called WellPay Zinc, which was pretty successful. And basically from there, I went through a number of roles. But that's really how I got into kind of payments in the first place.
Yeah. And so kind of you get to the end of your time at WorldPay and then you move on to, was it Thread at that point?
So actually, I'd done quite a long time at WellPay and monetized at that point, and so I decided I wanted to get out of payments for a little bit, and actually joined a company called Nested, which was really looking at trying to improve the house buying process by adding a sort of a financial liquidity element to that. So really interesting. Learned a lot about the UK property market, trying to predict house prices, and really doing something that was more B2C, which was new muscle that I developed, which is great. Really, really glad to have the time to do that. And had a great sort of run there and really enjoyed that. But the pull of payments was too great, and I ended up coming back, and that's when I joined Thread.
And then, so at Thread, it was around the processor. It was a processor, wasn't it? So
on the issuing side. So I've been used to working on the merchant side, and that's where I have most of my experience. But also really good to work on the issuer side. So working with people who wanted to issue cards to their customers, and that's a huge area all by itself. And so learning the other half of the payments market, if that makes sense, was also, I felt, rounded me out to really understand the economics and the drivers and the ecosystems that live on that side. And Thread was a great place to work, because it was really one of the foundations and cornerstones of how fintech grew in the UK, particularly the neobanks. I think pretty much they all started using Thread as their processor. Many of them then went on to develop their own solutions. But anyone who it's still a very credible firm for anyone who wants to launch car programs in around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And so from there, was it then you went on to Checkout?
Yep. Joined Checkout from there. Amazing ride. Checkout's a great business. Growing really well. And really kind of taking their acquiring business and trying to make it as successful as possible, trying to launch it in more countries, build new products. Really fun time there. And then joined GoCardless at the back of that.
Right, and here we are now.
Exactly.
So I mean, it spans quite some time.
Yep. Have to remind me, Hamish. That's fine.
Only a couple of years, But over that time, I imagine there were some pretty significant shifts and changes in the payment landscape. You would have seen quite a lot of change. What are some of the ones that you think are most significant?
Yeah, I think payments is always, I think maybe it's true of everything, but many things change and many things stay the same, right? So I think, but what have we seen? Definitely the digitization of payments, right? So that's at the most basic level, the shift from card and checks, from cash and checks to card and other payment methods. So that's clearly the biggest trend, right? And still the underlying fundamental trend that drives all of this, right? And then we've seen the rails themselves haven't actually changed that much. It's still card and bank transfers, but we've built layers on top of that have made massive differences, right? So whether that's the neobanks providing banking services in a much better UX, much easier way that resonates with consumers, whether that's digitization of the card, so going to contactless to Apple Pay to those kind of things. And then I think what we're seeing over the last 10 years is the prevalence of different payment methods, right? So I think card is still doing amazingly well, still growing, but we've seen A2A, we've seen different payment methods within BNPL, and the way that's happening in different countries is I think one of the big trends as well. So it's happening differently in different places, which is really interesting, exciting to see.
Have you seen any trends that kind of have come and gone that you kind of like, oh, it was a little blip, or maybe you thought would have taken off, but then maybe didn't?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all lived through that sort of a couple of crypto booms, I think, and so really trying to work out what it's for, and we still haven't quite nailed that from a pure consumer proposition. But like I said, I think there are some interesting things happening, as whether it's stablecoin or ledger as a service, these things are interesting, right? But still, for the amount of money that's gone into the value we've got out, I still think it's kind of potentially not what it hasn't really paid off. I think there's often a chat about who's going to disintermediate who, and I think that often just goes in cycles, right? And I think maybe the meta trend to all of this is services being bundled and unbundled, right? So, whenever there's a bundling goes on, then the trend is to say, well, I can do this one slither of it better than anyone else. And that's actually really good and really useful for the industry because it actually challenges, the ability for, can we make improvements? Can we drive competition? You can get lazy if all of these things are stacked together. But then ultimately, can you drive revenue from that? Maybe you can't. And then things tend to consolidate again. And I think we've been through a few of those cycles, right?
Yeah.
I think right now you've got a orchestration engine boom in terms of lots of players there. But like, is there enough value to be had to kind of justify all of those companies to exist at the same time? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember my time at working for a large bank in New Zealand, and we're a little bit. New Zealand's banks were a little bit behind the Apple Pay kind of uptake, and so some of the banks created these mini versions of credit cards that could stick to the back of your phone.
Right. Yeah,
it's almost like a transitional thing.
That is definitely a bridging product.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it was popular, but it was never super popular.
No, I remember them. Yeah.
And so, kind of bring it in terms of, I guess your roles around product and thinking about, product strategy in the context of payments and kind of your experience around that. How do you approach that? And to a certain extent, like, how has that approach changed over time as well?
Yeah, I mean, whether I'm right or wrong, I don't think it particularly has. I think the fundamentals are still exactly the same, right? So the technologies change, the economics might change, but not so much. And so it's really the fundamentals count. So who are your customers? What are their problems? How do you solve them? That's like one side of product strategy, and then the other side of product strategy is, what right do you have to win, right? Like, as in, why are we able to do that better than anyone else? Is that can we build a defendable moat around our business because we can do something that others can't? And then, the third part of any product strategy is the great thing about payments is, and it's true of most industries, I suspect, but particularly in payments, is you're never sure of things you could be doing. So product strategy is like, what ones aren't you doing? That's actually the hardest part of any product strategy, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's often the challenge, right? For any business is deciding the things not to do.
Right, and having conviction on that, right? So doing that for a sustained period of time that you aren't constantly changing your mind.
Yeah, not letting the magpie eyes kind of take over too much. So, on that idea of like, I guess the challenge around saying no to things or stopping things, like thinking more broadly again about your experience in leadership roles within product and in the payment space, what challenges or main challenges have you kind of come up against in your career?
Yeah, I think it's always really easy to get distracted, to get to that magpie thing. But equally at the same time, that can turn into being perceived as not listening, being ivory tower in the product team. We're not listening to the commercial team. Heaven forbid, Hamish.
I know. How dare you?
Yeah, exactly. So all of those things have to kind of, the real challenge is how do you show everyone that you are listening to all of those things, that you have a process that allows people to get confident that those things are being looked at, that you've assessed them, and then come up with a strategy and a set of choices because of that. I think if you do that in the open and people can see it, then you tend to kind of gain the trust and people can buy into that. I think if you try and sort of dictate it too much, then people don't buy into it. And so there's always the other thing is always the better option. And so I think it's like building trust and around the vision and around how you make those decisions.
Yeah, and again, still looking kind of back, I guess, in those reflections and learnings, is there anything that you've kind of had conviction in making a decision around and then kind of looked back kind of a few years down the track with hindsight and be like, maybe that wasn't quite the right decision?
Many of those. So I'll do my prepayments one, but I do remember. So when I was working in mobile, we it was a company called Symbian. Some of the readers may be old enough to remember back then, and we were having a session around should we. So we were one of the first platforms to label third-party apps on phones, and we were having a debate about should we do an app store. Right, this is before Apple had launched an app store.
Right.
And I was completely dead against it. I said, that's not how it should. We should follow the Windows model, let 1,000 flowers bloom. We shouldn't put barriers to entry, all that kind of stuff. That turned out to be a catastrophically terrible idea. I got that very wrong. Yeah.
Well, look, we all have to make
mistakes. You can learn, right? I'm not sure I have learned, but yeah.
Exactly. Okay, I'm going to start. I want to look a bit further ahead now. I want to kind of start to look to the future. We're starting some really exciting things happen in the payment space. There's more competitors in the market. As you said, there's more people playing in the orchestration layer. As you kind of look forward over the next couple of years, what do you think the most exciting thing is going to be in the payment space?
Yeah, so I think, alluded to a little bit earlier where it was talking about the proliferation of payment types. I think that's, definitely super interesting. I think, we're seeing a lot more, I don't know how to use the word innovation, but a lot more different ways of attempting to bring these services to market for different reasons. So like BNPL is a great example, filling a need that exists for, but like embedded within payments. You're seeing we saw in Asia, a number of years ago, the sort of explosion of the WeChat Pays and Alipays, again, filling a need that existed to be in this kind of super app that kind of worked. But that model didn't, completely, move to other territories. And we thought it might do, but it hasn't. We've seen things like in Brazil, the launch of Pix, really kind of taking off, proving that account to account can really work. Lots of different account to account mechanisms happening in Europe. So I think, all of that is showing that, there is, we don't have to have just a pure card market. We have to kind of think about, what services make sense for which type of consumers, which types of merchants, what type of payments. I think, we're just in a much better place at recognizing that now. And these things aren't, we used to kind of refer to them as alternative payment methods. And I think now they're just payment methods, right? There's just different type of payment methods. I think the other trend that kind of, for good and bad, that's kind of running in parallel with that is what I kind of refer to as payments nationalism. So I think, you're seeing a lot of countries seeing that dependency on external parties for their payment network may not be what they want. And so again, that also then drives this kind of more regional differentiation in payment methods. And you're seeing more and more regulation being put in place to say, you have to use a local payment method or a local payment scheme, or you have to be able to, degrade to a local payment method, or by default they have to go through a local payment scheme. So I think all of those things together just mean we've got a lot more of a sort of a vibrant canvas on which we can kind of do things, right? So that's my thing that I'm most interested in looking at the moment.
Yeah, and that probably links to some of the more kind of global nationalization terms or themes that we're seeing in the world right now, right? One of the things that I guess we're seeing in the way that companies are being valued in the startup space is where AI is becoming more and more prolific. Obviously, I use it day to day, probably without even realizing it now. How do you think AI fits into payments?
Yeah, so if I knew that really well, then I'd be, probably starting a company doing that. But no, there's clearly, like any business, you've got to look at every layer and say, how is AI going to impact that part of my business? Payments has traditionally already been quite an early adopter of certainly machine learning technologies for fraud prevention, screening, onboarding, AML, that kind of thing. So, already, when you make a payment, whether it's bank or card, there's, two sets of machine learning engines, maybe three sets of machine learning engines, all trying to process that information and assess the risk of that transaction. So one on the processor side, one on the issuer side, and then if you're using a card scheme, there's one in the middle with the schemes as well. So there's already like lots of AI activity kind of happening to assess the security of that payment. I think where we'll see other things happen is one in service, right? So every customer service proposition now has to have AI baked into it to drive the levels of efficiency that we think we want to see, and hopefully we do that in a way that's doesn't reduce the service but enhances the service, but still allows us to run it more efficiently than we've done before. And then I think there's this kind of early set of ideas around payments via AI. So will you let an agent make payments on your behalf? Early days, and I think there's some interesting stuff there. I think there's just a consumer thing here where one, will consumers trust this ultimately, and two, if things go wrong, who is liable, right? Like so there is a real legal thing that we've got to work through in terms of understanding who's liable for when things go wrong, who is picking up the tab if there's fraud, all of that kind of stuff, if an agent has made a decision on your behalf. So that's going to be super interesting to see how that evolves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know obviously at GoCardless we've got Success Plus, which is our smart retry. So using machine learning to look at all the payers within a scheme and to help identify when the best time to take a repayment or try the payment again is. And that's all kind of leaning into that machine learning, AI kind of space.
Anything where there's variables, you can throw this set of tools at it and see if you can optimize it.
So, you've been with us for a few months now in the world of account-to-account payments. Looking at how we've built our payment offering to create a new generation of payment solutions, that help businesses kind of overcome the challenges of sending and collecting money. What are your initial kind of reflections on how we're doing at GoCardless?
Yeah, I mean, so look, I wouldn't have joined if I didn't think there was a great proposition here, right? So very excited to be here and to help with that. Account to account in the UK and Europe has been nascent, and we've been kind of thinking it's going to be coming for a long time. But I think now you're really seeing the green shoots of that, and you're seeing the volumes are now actually pretty serious levels. And I think where that started has been in businesses where they felt more of the pain of the traditional payment methods and card and others. So whether it's been high value transactions, whether it's been recurring payments, that kind of thing. So the proof is there now that this works. I think there's just lots of now we've got to really deliver on it and make it real for merchants, but also consumers, and get over that activation hump, which has been there for a long time. But I think my sense is that's now more than ever, and so happy to try and make that happen.
I know there was recently a study by Juniper Research, and they did a study in looking at what they thought the global value of transactions through A2A payments would be by 2029, actually. So not that far away, actually. And they think there'll be a rise of about 230% in value terms. That's 5.7 trillion globally, which is still pretty significant growth. It's still significant volume, but still only really scratching the surface in terms of global payments. Right.
I think the nice thing about payments is the TAM is essentially infinite. Right. Yeah. So there's so much play for, and when people kind of go, is it this payment method or that payment method? It's really we still have cash to go after. Right. Yeah. So we all have room to play. But two, I think A2A will take up more and more portion of that as we go forward.
And so, how do you see A2A payments evolving over the next 3 to 5 years, and not just in the UK but globally as well?
So I think, as we said before, in some countries, it's already either a significant part of the market or growing to become a significant part of the market. And I think you're just seeing a real trend in how different countries have attacked this space. Some are very regulation led and very centralized, like a PIX is a good example. Others, like the UK and the US, is very much yes, there are some regulations, but it's been left up to the players to kind of work out how that works. I think we'll see what works, right? And then we'll adopt the number of different models. I think will sort of crystallize, and there won't just be one, but there'll be a few that seem to work, and we'll rally around those. Obviously, we got things in the short term like CVRP in the UK and equivalent types of things in the rest of the world, where should really be a catalyst for seeing A2A being used in more and more places. Being able to be used in more use cases where sometimes they're not as well suited at the moment. And then I think I think we'll just also see even if all those things don't work, consumers are just seeing this more and more, and so I think consumer comfort with this as a payment method is going to increase, which then has a network effect on whether people want to do it, whether merchants want to offer it, whether they like to promote it at point of sale. So all of those things I think will sort of come together as we go forward. I think why now? All of those things have kind of been in place before, so why is it now? I think we've seen enough penetration in some industries where now it's becoming less of a scary concept. People are familiar with it. The volume's there. They're seeing that it's secure, that it's delivering on the benefits of cost, of time, and so hopefully that then becomes a sort of a snowball as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I know obviously the UK's been a leader in this space. Europe's been kind of a semi-follower, but really kind of looking at even Australia with Pay2. New Zealand's got a heap of open banking providers opening up at the moment. I constantly see ex-colleagues working on really exciting open banking stuff. And the US, although their payment infrastructure is a lot kind of further behind the UK and Europe, it's still kind of starting to come to life there, isn't it?
For sure. Well. Yeah, and I think with the US, whether it's payments or other forms of technology, often it kind of, because of their more federated, takes slower to get to a point, but then when it goes really quick, right? And so you start seeing things really take off. And when people kind of say it's like, you see things like Zelle and Venmo, where P2P A2A is actually super popular, and people use that a lot. So the nice thing about A2A and this space is there's lots of different parts of it, and so you're definitely seeing real differences in how that manifests itself.
And I guess not so much an elephant in the room, but maybe one of the things that kind of you can't talk about A2A payments and not talk about cards, right? Which is really the main competitor to account-to-account payments. Do you think open banking payments can ever be a real challenger to cards?
I mean, I think they already are in some places, right? So I think it's a question of, can you get it to a point where it's competing in more places, right? So, look at recurring payments, in the UK, so many of those happen, like direct debit, may turn to CVRP over time. So I think you've already got high penetration of that in some markets. So we've got to find the things that make it viable for merchants and for consumers. I think customer protection is always brought up as one of those things. So working on that, and if that can't be provided centrally, then maybe you do that. Maybe that's an opportunity for companies to fill that space and provide opportunities in that way. So I think, but cards are great, right? Let's not do cards down. They do an amazing job with Visa and MasterCard particularly, but the other schemes as well do a great job because they centralize those platforms, keep everyone moving forward with the standards and evolving that with security and all those kind of things. So they do a great job and they serve a real purpose. But I think, there's also, reasons to think they can be challenged, the cost, the time of transactions, that kind of thing. So where those things are important to merchants and to consumers, then A2A has a chance to penetrate those.
I guess one of the kind of places where cards is most prevalent is in the physical point of sale, right? We've actually got a couple of customers that use open banking at their point of sale through QR codes and various means, and we know that it's something that Apple is exploring. Like, do you think open banking can be a challenger in the physical point of sale space?
Glad you said that. I think for sure, right? And I think it's in, again, like one of the things that card is really good at. And by the way, they've worked for years to make them good at this sort of stuff. So if I look at mass transit in the UK, tapping my card on the card reader, there's a ton of investment that's gone into making that a very microsecond experience, right? Can open banking compete with that? Probably not, but paying for my bill in a restaurant where the time is very different, and actually you've got other problems, which is the waiter has to go get the thing, I have to get his attention, like stuff. If I can pay that with a QR code that's on the table or on my bill, actually open banking can solve that problem really easily. So that's a physical point of sale problem, but maybe you don't think of it as a physical point of sale solution. So there's different scenarios in in-person payments where I think A2A absolutely can be a better solution than card. And I think you'll see it kind of definitely penetrate into that. I think, with COVID and those kind of things that sort of happened through the pandemic, you saw more and more, let's say, in-person experiences, but that were kind of done in a non-contact way. And I think that opened up the door. I think restaurants being the primary one, but more and more usage of those types of payment methods. So I think, I mean, it would be a massive missed opportunity if we didn't try and make that happen for sure.
Excellent. So I guess you've been with us for just under 3 months now.
Almost 2 months.
Yeah, almost 2 months. It sounds like you're an open banking expert.
No way. Like I say, I've made a career out of bluffing. So
great.
So it seems to be doing okay.
Yeah. So I guess what are your, thinking about GoCardless, the payments, your experience in payments, what are your priorities at GoCardless kind of over the next kind of 12, 18 months in particular?
Coming into business, really enjoyed kind of meeting everyone and learning what we have and how the products work. I think the bones are really good. I love the fact that we've got so many small businesses already working with us. Really happy with how we're doing it, and then we're also working with some of the largest businesses in the world, utility companies, that kind of stuff as well. So that's a real privilege. And in terms of what I need to work out is how do I turn those things into a real sort of advantage for the business, and how do we leverage both sides of what we do to kind of create really great products that we can take to market and answer some of those questions that we talked about earlier about how do we make A2A really like the primary payment method rather than the secondary one. So lots to think about and lots to kind of work through, but I think we've got some great basis to build on.
Okay, thank you, Shaun. We've now come to the game section of the podcast. Okay. So I'm going to play a quick game of higher or lower. Now, I didn't really know how to play this game, but thankfully I've got some instructions here. So I'm going to give you a random fact about payments. I'm then going to ask you a question, and you're going to have to tell me whether the answer to that question is higher or lower than the fact that I provided you with.
Got it, I think.
Okay, here's the first fact. BNY recently processed the largest instant payment in US history at $10 million following a limit increase. Okay, the question now is the combined value of HMRC's tax payments made using open banking in the first week of January 2024 higher or lower than that number?
Okay. So my hope is that it's higher, right? Like I know I did my tax return that week, so and I did it via a banking payment. So hopefully that's higher.
That's correct. It is, in fact, higher than the $10 million. So over 1 million payments were made using open banking with a combined value of £3.5 billion. So very, very
Yeah,
impressive.
that's great.
Okay, here's the next fact. So the first true open banking transaction was taken on the 1st of June 2018.
Okay.
The value of that transaction was £4.99.
Okay. Do you know what they bought?
No idea. I'm not even sure what you could buy for that.
Well, back then maybe you could get a Pret sandwich, but not anymore.
Sure, yeah, no, definitely not now. Okay, so here's the question. Is the average transaction value for a contactless payment in the UK in 2024 higher or lower than that?
I should know this. So yeah, I think it's higher, right?
Correct. That is correct, indeed. It is higher. So the average transaction value for a contactless payment was around £16.10p.
Very good.
Okay, so here's the final question. You're doing very well so far.
Going for 3 for 3.
Look,
Okay.
you know, yeah.
I would have
absolutely.
taken 2 for 3 at the beginning, so
Okay,
that's,
right.
That's all right.
Like, if you
That's
get this
my
one
bar.
right, I'll give you a
Okay.
beer. I'll take you for a beer after
All right.
this. How's
All
that?
right, all right.
Okay.
Okay.
Worldwide card fraud losses reached approximately $33.83 billion in 2023.
Yeah,
That's the fact. It's a lot of money.
it's a lot of money.
Okay. Is the card processing fees paid by US businesses alone in 2023 higher or lower than that?
I'm going to assume higher, otherwise, the economics of that business doesn't quite work out.
Yeah, it's a lot higher.
Right.
So US businesses paid over $172 billion in card processing fees
a lot
in
of fees.
2023. So it's a lot of fees.
Yep.
It's a lot of fees. I mean, it's crazy to think that that's a sustainable model for businesses.
Yeah, like the schemes and the acquirers are offering a service in there for sure, but there's definitely some opportunity to help reduce that with account to account and other payment methods.
Well, Shaun, guess what? Our time's almost up. I can't believe it.
Shame.
It's gone so quickly. Before we do, though, I'd like to get your predictions on the payment landscape as we look forward. So I'm going to give you some future ideas and trends, and I'd like you to tell me whether you think it's a forecast or it's fiction. The first one is cards will no longer be the dominant form of payment by 2050 in the UK. Forecast or fiction?
Oh, I don't know. It's probably forecast, but I think it's going to be close.
Yeah. Okay. I think it will be as well. I think feels like MasterCard and Visa and Amex have got a pretty big stronghold in there, right?
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, this is a good product doing, that works, right?
Exactly. Cryptocurrency will go mainstream in the next 5 to 10 years. Forecast or fiction?
I think if you mean for consumers, then fiction, right? I can't see, there's too much volatility. There's lots of other reasons why it's not a great medium of transaction, but I think, stablecoins, maybe.
Okay, one last question. Variable recurring payments via open banking will replace direct debit in the next 5 to 10 years. Forecast or fiction?
If we get it right, then forecast, right? Maybe that's a bit of a cop out, but I think there's a few things to work out there from a regulatory point of view, making sure that we can answer the questions and make consumers feel like it's as good as direct debit from a protection point of view. But the mechanism is good, so no reason not to believe it. It can't be a forecast.
Yeah, interesting. I think there's a big journey we need to take consumers on
sure.
in that space in particular, right? Shaun, that's the end of our time. Thank you so much for coming
thank
in
you.
and
Thank you.
settling up with us. It was super insightful.
Yeah, really appreciate the time. Thank you, Hamish.
I guess I need to take you for that beer now.
Let's go.
Let's do it.